Okay, Brian Murphy, Murphs Elite, man. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm
Absolutely.
really excited about it. The way that we got together is my son saw you speaking down at
Yes, he
Paramus
did.
Catholic High School,
Yep.
and
Great
he was
kid.
really
Came.
moved by your speech.
Yeah, no, I saw him, because when you're speaking, you always kind of pick out those few kids that are really engaged. And so,
Uh,
I was watching him a lot of the times, and you kind of focus on those kids, and it kind of gives you more confidence and to be able to, do what you're doing at a higher level. And so I was uh I was surprised when he came up after me with, and he talked about his whole story and he was telling me about you. And I thought it was a great opportunity. It just kind of worked out how it did. And he
you're
was
not just saying these nice things because I'm his dad, right?
absolutely not. He's a great size too.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
really
So,
hope he does great. He
so
looks
listen,
looks great.
a common thread that we share is football. So let's talk a little football real quick.
Sure.
I was looking over your Facebook page and whatnot. Are you a Bergen Catholic alum?
So no, I could totally see how you would think that. And I know to a lot of ex Bosco alums it was a harsh pill to swallow. But so I did go to Don Bosco Prep. I was there from
Okay.
2006 to 2010. Back then actually they recruited me for basketball. So Coach DeVario, Coach Moody over there, who are still, I'm pretty sure Moody is still there. DeVario, I'm not really sure about, but they recruited me out of eighth grade. I wasn't this size all the time, so
Uh,
I was a smaller kid freshman year, eighth grade. Basketball was kind of my best sport. I was always a great football player, but, not at that level of what I thought. When I came to
uh,
Bosco
uh.
and I saw Trotow and Sims and stuff, my first thing was, wow, I'm never going to play here,
Did you
so.
play with Matt? Was Matt
So
there at the
Matt
time?
was Matt and I know each other really well. Matt was a senior when I was a freshman. So
Oh, okay.
I'm back a lot. We developed a great relationship,
Yeah, Matt's a great
well.
guy. Marco actually trains with him. He's been a
He
really great influence on
he's the
Marco.
best. He's the
Yeah.
best. So and we'll get more into that later because him and I are
Mhm.
connected on that training level as well. But yeah, so freshman went to Bosco, played basketball, football, and then sophomore year really started doing well, started getting bigger. And then junior year, I started getting some serious interest with, going to combines and going to different camps in the
Mhm.
off season, stuff like that. And basically, Coach Toll at the time, who was the coach there, he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, guess what? You're not playing basketball anymore." So, he didn't want me to get injured. I knew there was a little bit of drama surrounding that with the basketball coaches. It was a little awkward for me.
Uh,
But it was a good decision. Basketball was great for me to develop my athleticism in a way that
sure.
I don't think many other things could. And it was football all the way. Junior, senior, really hit it hard, trained an insurmountable amount of time,
Huh.
like
So
you.
you graduated Bosco.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And where did you go to college?
University of Pittsburgh.
Wow. You played
Yeah.
at Pitt.
Yes, sir.
Dang. That's
Yep.
impressive, man. ACC, brother.
Yeah, so it was actually the Big East
The
back
Big
when
East.
I
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
committed back then, but we transitioned, I think, after my sophomore year to the ACC. So
Did you end up playing all 4 years at Pitt?
I did, yes. So I
Wow.
actually I did redshirt a year, so technically I have still 1 year of eligibility
Uh-huh.
because I do talk about it obviously in my speech, but there was a time where obviously wasn't doing great in my life, and I ended
Yeah.
up leaving school at the end there. So I do
Uh,
actually have 1 year left. I don't think I will be going back
you don't
anytime
want to strap it
soon.
up again and
Nah,
go for it?
here's the thing. I try to stay in good shape. I work out constantly. I
Yeah.
still think of myself as a washed up athlete, but I still got it a little bit. But you know what?
Yeah.
I did suffer a lot of, really bad injuries there, that still are aching me, bad back. My wrist was
Yeah.
reconstructed basically. I've had
Yeah.
ACL, foot
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
broken. And then I had a lot of concussions also, which
Okay.
were, pretty serious to the point where I actually got checked a few years ago just
Yeah.
to make sure. It was when all the CTE stuff was coming out.
Yeah.
My wife was worried. We were
Sure.
like,
Sure.
let me just go to a neurologist, see what's going on.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm fortunate. Nothing seems to be wrong. But I want to stay on top of that. So just with that issue, I don't think I would ever try to go back for sure.
So reading about you again, what's out there in the public eye is that you were suffering from opioid addiction.
Correct.
Were the injuries and whatnot from sports the gateway into it with painkillers?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I obviously dive into this in great detail in my speech, but,
Uh-huh.
in high school, I I grew up, me and my brothers grew up very, lower middle class. We didn't
Uh-huh.
have a lot of money. I was fortunate after the first 2 years to be granted a scholarship to go to Bosco because my family just couldn't afford to send me there. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's
you
great.
know, I was very motivated, very disciplined. I had great role models and my brothers, my coaches that kind of showed me the way. And also, my parents and my mom especially was really realistic with me about what my future looked like. And she
Yeah,
basically told me, hey, listen, you're either going to go to college and get in on your own, or you're probably not going to go because, you're not taking student loans out. I can't pay for it. We can't afford you to send you anywhere. So that
that's
was a
motivation.
huge driving factor behind my
Yeah.
work ethic. And, as I'm from up there, Monroe.
Yeah.
So the commute and the sacrifice, my
Yeah.
mom had to make was
Yeah.
unbelievable, and I'm forever grateful for it. But listen, and I try to tell kids this, and I try to tell a lot of the people that I was training in the past, stuff like that, of the amount of sacrifice that it does take to get to that level. I mean, I was up at 5 a.m. every morning. I was home at 9:30 at night, two workouts every day, training, school, like that was just part of that life. And
Sure.
so my body did end up taking a beating at Bosco. I played hard, I was coached hard. Our practices were brutal,
Yeah.
but it did really get me prepared for the next level. And then when
Right.
I got to Pitt, I, immediately was getting reps actually in like the starting lineup as a freshman in the summer. I was just really prepared for the collegiate level because of my coaching. We
Right.
were so fortunate to have Anthony Campanelli, Nunzio Campanelli, Toll.
Yeah.
We had
Yeah.
all these elite coaches that are now at the collegiate level,
Yeah.
professional level.
Correct.
And we didn't know it at the time, but
Right. Right. Right.
now that I look back on it, it was crazy to think of who we actually had
Yeah.
in our locker room with
Well,
us.
that's the big North in Jersey for you, man. The
Exactly.
competition is extreme there,
The kids
all
are
those
they're just
schools.
so fortunate to
Yeah.
to live in this
Be
area.
part
And
of it. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So I ended up breaking my foot freshman
Mm.
year, third week, second or third week of summer camp. We had our first inter squad scrimmage, and that was the first time I was introduced to opiates. And now I tell people back then it was very different than where we were living, the society we're in now,
Hmm.
especially dealing with opiates. It was the education, the awareness of it. It was nothing. You never
Right.
heard about people being addicted to painkillers. It was
Right.
in the epidemic that we know was in such its infancy that it
So,
wasn't
Brian,
even
what year was it when you were a freshman in college?
2010, 2011. So I
Okay,
graduated
so
in
15 years
2010.
ago,
Yeah,
roughly.
so this
Yeah.
is this is like 2010
Yeah.
summertime.
Yeah.
Um, so nobody really knew the ramifications and nobody knew the horrific side effects and how addictive these things really were. Now, I didn't take any of the pills. And I talk about this in my speech because that's just not who I was back then. I never
Hmm.
wanted like that easy way out. I never did drugs in high school. I never drank, nothing. And I highlight that also where I talk about how a lot of my teammates, they were always out partying, celebrating. I didn't actually drink my first sip of alcohol till after my senior year state championship game after we won because
Wow.
it just I never wanted to be that guy, to be the party guy. And I
Yeah.
knew what I had to do in order to get to that next level. And I didn't care about the peer pressure or the outside, the
Right. Right. Right.
external people
Yeah.
telling
Other
me
things were
what's
more
what.
important to you. Yeah.
Exactly. So I
Yeah.
had a mission, I had a goal, and so that's the type of kid I was. I never was that, I wasn't smoking weed, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't out doing bad things because I couldn't afford to. My
Yeah.
my parents didn't have money to, God forbid, something happen and I got arrested. My mom used to always tell me like, don't call me from jail, and she was
Yeah.
she was hard on that, and she was a hard ass, but that's what I needed. And so that continued up and through college. I got the pills. They were so, lenient with it, but it never appealed to me. I threw them away. And so the next year, things are going great. I'm playing, everything's good. And then during our next spring ball, I end up re-injuring an old injury from high school, but I injured it really bad. So I ended up breaking my wrist again. Another bone. I backtrack a little bit. I did hurt my wrist in high school. I broke my scaphoid bone, which is one of three bones in your body that if you don't heal it properly, it dies. And so I knew
Hmm.
I hurt my wrist in high school, but
Interesting.
I didn't tell anybody about it because I was afraid of, Coach Toll or my parents of saying like, "Oh, what are you
Yeah.
going to play now?" So I sucked it
Right.
up. I taped it. It was painful. I ended up getting through it. It was towards the end of the year, so it wasn't a big
Hmm.
deal. I didn't think anything of it. Um, spring ball comes that third year, I think it was, yeah, 2012. Hit my wrist against the ground, broke another bone. They're x-raying it and they're like, what is going on in here? So the bone ended up kind of fusing in the wrong place and it was cutting off the blood supply from my wrist to my hand. So they were like,
Wow.
you need to do like emergency surgery. So they did
Wow.
for the life of me, I think about this all the time, and I'm like, I cannot remember the type of surgery. It was some type of non-union bone thing because I had to go into
Mm.
my forearm and actually saw off a piece of bone from my forearm and then replace a bunch of the bones in my hand. Some carpal
Wow.
bones, my scaphoid bone. It was a serious surgery. And so, I talk to the kids in my speech and I tell them that before the surgery, they sat me down and they put a huge needle in my neck, which was a nerve block that they give for
Yep.
extremity injuries, which, basically temporarily paralyzes your limb. It allows, your pain medication to kick in for the first 24 hours or so.
Hmm.
I get out of surgery, I'm in recovery, things are great. My team doctors are there, my trainers, they're like, all right, whenever you're ready, we'll bring you back home. They bring me home. And by the time I get to the dorm, my wrist is starting to hurt. And I'm like, is this normal? And they're like, no, it shouldn't be. Like, maybe it's mental, whatever. So I'm like, okay, whatever. They wait with me like 10 or 15 minutes. And within that time frame, something just triggers. And I am in the most excruciating pain you can imagine. And
Mm.
they rush me back to the hospital. They're calling the doctors on their way. They're expecting me, but I'm outside the window throwing up from the pain. I was actually,
Wow.
blacking out, going in and out of consciousness. And I tell the people when I'm speaking, I don't actually remember that much detail about the car ride there. All I do remember is the next thing I woke up and I was surrounded by doctors. And I felt this sensation that I've never felt before. And it was from all the morphine they just shot me up with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, it's such a vivid memory on
Mm.
how powerful it was the first time I felt it.
Right.
And it's almost as if it was like an instinctual thing that triggered in me where I thought to myself, wow, this is dangerous because I want this feeling every day for the rest of my life because it just
Mm.
took away everything. My pain was gone,
Right.
worry was gone, everything. And so I didn't know it at the time. And I didn't know how severe it was going to get, but I was like, Jesus, I wish I could get this every day. And so they
Mm.
had me hooked up
Right on, right there on the first dose, right, right
on the
there.
spot, on the spot.
Yeah.
They had me hooked up to a morphine drip for 3 days. I pushed that button
Wow.
every 7 minutes you could push it. I pushed it every single 7 minutes till I passed out. I woke up again, pushed it, and yeah, they dropped me off afterwards with a big bottle of pills,
Mm.
very strong. I finished, and I highlight this as well in my speech where I tell them that the first day I took one pill, and then that very next day I made a split second choice and I was like, you know what? That didn't really do it for me. I didn't get that same feeling. Let me take
Mm.
another one. So I took one extra pill that next day. And then 10 days later, the whole bottle was gone. And then 3 weeks after that, I was buying drugs on the street. That
Wow.
easy. That
Just like
easy.
that
That
within
quick.
3 weeks.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I sat through a presentation one time. The local DA of Orange County, New York, did a presentation at the Warwick School District, and I went and
Yeah.
attended with my boys. And they had a stat up there that it was like, if you try heroin or fentanyl one time, you basically have a 10% chance of surviving more than 10 years of life. Like it's that much of a damaging factor in your life. So it's rare, right, to get out of the cycle like you have, you know?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. How did you break the cycle? How did you get out of it? And where are you at now? You know?
Yeah, yeah. So, it was certainly not easy, and it certainly was not a quick road by any means, but my addiction grew and progressed at Pittsburgh. I was doing them every day. After that first bottle of pills that I went through in that short period of time, there was, I say not a day went by where I didn't take these pills, maybe one or two here and there where I just didn't have access, I didn't have money, but
Mm,
every single day, practice, game, for the rest of my career, I was on these pills. And so
mm,
it took years. I When my addiction got bad enough, we finally, had a meeting with my coaches. They sent me to rehab. That didn't work. Unfortunately, it was a state-run facility, which was, the care was inadequate, the security was
hmm.
inadequate. There were drugs actually everywhere in the facility. So I
Mm,
detoxed the first few days while I was there, but I was using pretty much the entire 30 days that I was gone. And
mm,
then, I came back. That's when I had that 1 year left of eligibility. So this is technically my redshirt junior year. And, I didn't have a great support system. And I don't blame them because once again, it was nobody knew what to expect.
right,
Nobody knew how to
right.
how to
Yeah, it
handle
was
this
early days.
this
Yeah.
disease, that people were struggling
Hmm.
with. So I didn't have a great experience when I came back to school. So I quit. I left. I
Mm.
had 1 year left of football. I only had 3 classes left to finish my bachelor's degree. In my
Wow.
mind, it was, you're so far gone. That's all you can think about. So I get asked that
Mm,
question all the time, like, oh, like, what happened to your motivation? It's all gone. None of it matters anymore. So my only thought was, oh, I'm not being treated right, or, they think about me a certain way, like I'm leaving because I just want to get high all the time. That's my new life. So
mm.
I went home, got started on heroin immediately. Um,
Wow.
and fortunately, my mom, she surprise drug tested me one day because, obviously I was not the man that she raised. I was a
Right,
completely
right.
different person. And I
Yeah.
think it was so easy for me to hide it for so long because when you're playing at that level, you're never home. So you're home maybe 2 weeks out of the year. You're in spring ball, you're in summer classes, summer
Mm,
training camp, everything. So you don't get to go home. It was easy for me to hide it from my really close friends and family because that's just you just don't see they didn't see me enough. And the people out there, I was able to hide it because I was still performing on the field. Obviously not to the ability that I had, and I was still passing my classes, but I should have been a straight A student. I was blessed
right.
with that type of
Yeah. Drive. Yeah.
intellect. Yeah,
Discipline. Hmm.
and so it they just had no idea. And that's how I was able to kind of get over on everybody for so long. And then when I came home and the heroin started, she drug tested me. I went back to rehab again, but it was a program in Florida, and I realized that 30 days was just not long enough for me to undo all the
Hmm.
damage that I've done to my
Hmm.
brain, to how I thought, how I was supposed to be a standard person living in society. I didn't know how to do it. And so
Mm.
I talk about it where it's like, and I'm leaving out a lot of details here, obviously, of the things that
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and the horrible things that I've done to get money and to get what I
Yeah.
needed every day. But you would have thought that I hit rock bottom, and you would have thought that, okay, you have time clean. This is what it would have take, what it would have took for you to get your life back on track. But it couldn't be any further from the truth because the entire time I was there, and I was community leader, and the people loved me, like everything was so great. You would have bet any amount of money that I would have stayed clean, but it was all a ruse. It was all this
Yeah.
persona that I thought I had to put on to just satisfy these people and to let me
Sure.
out and to let me continue doing what I wanted to do. Because, 30 days, the minute I got back, the first thing I thought about, and the only thing I really thought about in there when I was truly honest with myself was, I can't wait to get high again. And that's the
Uh-huh.
sad
Uh-huh.
reality of it. So I ended up, leaving
Mm.
that rehab. I did have 30 days clean. I went back to Pittsburgh to finish my degree. And the day I got back, I shot heroin for the first time in the bathroom of a gas station. And I
Wow.
thought I was going to die. I had my phone dialed to 911 sitting on my lap. And after that, I was homeless, kicked out of the place I was living, and I lived in my car, slept and lived out of my car in front of the library at the University of Pittsburgh for over a month. And, that was, and then you'd think, oh, this has got to be rock bottom for him,
Right.
And in a way it was because I would see a lot of my teammates, friends that I knew from school walking by in the middle of I'm in the middle of campus. And they would see me. I'd have a pillow and a blanket in
In
the
your
car.
car. They'd
They
see you
wouldn't
in your
say
car.
anything, but everybody
Uh-huh.
knew. It was
Right.
extremely embarrassing. And
Right.
eventually, being stared at, and I could tell they were judging me. I
Yeah.
couldn't take it anymore. So I came back home. And then,
Wow.
my mom, obviously, she was done with me. I was no longer welcome to live in this house. So
Mm.
not this house, but the one up in
Sure, sure.
Monroe. And my brother at the time, fortunately, was trying to get me into a detox facility down in Queens. So
Uh-huh.
we
Uh-huh.
all drove down, but the detox was full. So I had to spend 11 days inside the psychiatric ward of Flushing Hospital over
Oh
Thanksgiving in
boy.
November of 2015. So this is a little more than 4 years after my addiction started.
Mm.
And just to give a little
Wow.
timeline here of how quickly it does progress and how quickly your life can fall apart. Because as of
Yeah. So I
20,
mean, 3 weeks, right, from the injury, from the surgery, and then 4 years later, right?
yeah,
Like it happened that fast, it hooked you that fast, and now 4 years later, here you
yeah,
are in Flushing, Queens, in a psychiatric ward.
yeah. And
Wow.
it's funny because you say it happened that fast and people are like, oh, well, 4 years is, but you need to realize that. And everything is perspective. So for 3 of those years, yes, my life was unmanageable. Yes, I was a heavily addicted drug addict, you could say. But,
Sure.
I still had relationships. I was still passing classes. I was still starting at a Division 1 level, which,
Yeah, it's
listen,
amazing.
it was like it was kind of wild that I was still able to accomplish that. But then
Hmm.
within maybe 4 or 5 months, lost everything, had no money,
Yeah.
lost my family, lost every friend. I burned every bridge,
Mm.
homeless in a psych ward. Like that is what I really like to highlight because it's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can you can only go so long with hiding things from people and living
Right.
such a
Right.
lie.
Before it catches up to you. Yeah.
And the minute
Yeah.
it catches up to you, and the minute it teeters over into that downhill, before you know and they say it in rehab, jails, institutions, or death. There's only three options. So
Hmm.
that's I knew that was the only options I had. The psych ward was horrific, horrific experience. And
Mm.
I knew that I didn't belong there, but I understood that if I didn't stay there, which I had no choice at the time, obviously, I couldn't be let out unless I had a
Sure.
treatment plan set in place. But I understood that if I left there or I didn't go in there, I was going to die very, very, very soon after. Because,
Hmm.
like I said, I'd be on the street, no car, no
Yeah.
money, no nothing. You don't know. I know what I would have done, to get what I needed to get because it had such a hold on me. That's all I cared about. And,
Yeah.
I think about that now a lot and I look back on that and it's horrific thinking about the things that I would have accomplished and I would have done in order to just maintain my habit. And it's scary when you think about what type of person that made you become. Fortunately, 11 days came and went, and I got shipped off to a place in Prescott, Arizona. It was a 6-month rehab program. I obviously
Wow.
did not want to go, but I had no choice. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was huge on accountability. It was basically like a halfway house where 6 or 8 guys lived in a house. It was no bullshit. Excuse my language. I'm not sure if I
Yeah.
I could curse here, but
Absolutely.
it was
Whatever
no,
you feel.
no bullshit. It was you wake up at this time, you make your bed. Day one, you go, you walk the town, you find a job. There was no cars, no bikes, nothing. You walked everywhere, you found a job, you paid rent, and you had meetings every day, you got drug tested every day, and we had this thing called Circle every night where everybody in the program would get together. And basically, our program director, who's still a very good friend of mine to this day, would basically just call you out on your bullshit and on your lies in
Yeah.
front of everybody.
Hmm.
And I think that was the greatest single thing that has ever happened to me because nobody did that. You know, your coaches do it to an
Hmm.
extent, but they don't know
Right.
you
Right.
personally on that deep
Right.
level. But when you're vulnerable like that and you have nothing, you're going to show a different side to you. And they did an unbelievable job of really just bringing out the truth and teaching you to literally look yourself in the mirror and be honest with
Hmm.
yourself. And you'd be
Hmm.
surprised how many people struggle with that. And I know
Sure.
firsthand
Yeah.
because for years I would manipulate and tell myself whatever I needed to hear in order to keep on the path that I was going, and I would justify it however I needed to. So that was a huge thing that I learned that was really like the catalyst for me to get better, to reclaim my life. Um, 12-step program. I had a sponsor, worked the steps, went to meetings, did everything right, started getting myself back physically, mentally. Um, and yeah, it was an unbelievable place and I'm forever grateful for it. And then after the 6 months was up, the program actually hired me to become a manager there. I, mentored a lot of kids. I was, a lot of
Wow.
different people's sponsors, which was a really awesome experience of taking other people through the steps. And then I ended up tearing my ACL in an intramural basketball league that I was in out there. And so I was
Oh
kind of
boy.
forced to come back home because I had to get surgery.
Uh-huh.
And I really didn't want to come. And I remember I was talking to my mom before this happened, and I said, I may never come back, because I haven't felt joy in years. And finally I
Right.
had this, I was building a life and I had, happiness again. And it was a great
Mm,
feeling. And so I was like,
that's amazing.
why would I go back? But
Right. Right.
I had to, I had to get the knee fixed. And, I came back and it was I had a lot of fear around it, obviously. But, I did what I had to do. I talked to the people I needed to talk to. And, I will never talk down or talk bad about the ways people get sober. However works for you, works for you. And that's
Mm,
amazing because there are so many different ways that I've heard of people that get clean,
mhm,
cold turkey, 12 steps, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever it is, and whatever works for you is amazing. The only problem I had was that, I think with the structure of being an athlete, I kind of I kind of drifted away from AA, NA in a way because it was not really centered around habits or discipline and stuff that I was
mhm,
used to. And so,
mhm,
I kind of really went against the grain and people people that I'm still close to obviously this day and I hold no ill will, but they were like, basically saying like, well, if you do this, you're probably going to go back, and you're probably going to relapse, stuff like that, because that's just what a lot of people do. And
mhm,
I thought for so long and I was like, I need to implement processes in my life
mhm,
that are gonna keep me on the straight and narrow, that are gonna make me want to continue living this way. Because I didn't want to be like those guys that you see that are still miserable, that it still has such a hold on them that, they're coming back every day and every day. And I'm like, that's just not the life that I wanted personally. And I have
mm,
no ill will towards anybody that wants to live that way. It's whatever works for you. As long as you're healthy and happy, I'm all for it. I needed to find something different, something to help me in a way that wasn't going to meetings every day. And, the things that did get me sober, I just needed to find something new, I thought. And so I developed this, and I call it my ethos. And it's the code that I was going to live my life by. It was the man that I was going to every day I woke up and I said, this is the man I want to be. It was the thing that I followed. It was the thing, I call it my shoreline because it guides me and all my morals, values, every choice, decision I make is all influenced by where I am and am I being the man I want to be during this time.
mm,
So,
mm,
and I tell the kids about doing the little things. And I
mhm,
talk about, one of the things that we were taught in Arizona was put your shopping cart away when you're at the grocery store. And it seems so silly, but it's just about doing the little things right. And it took me a long time to really
Hmm.
appreciate that because in
When you say
doing
put your
those,
shopping cart away, you mean like when you get to your car and you unload it, actually put it back in the return area.
yeah. And you'd
Uh-huh.
be, and I still to this day, like I look around and I see so many people not doing it, and I
Yeah.
can't help but, and it kills me because, and I'm not judgmental, believe me, I fall
Yeah.
short all the time on a
But
bunch
it's
of little
ingrained
things.
in you and you're a
It's
disciplinarian.
ingrained. So it's
Yeah,
like
right.
when you do those little things right and you continuously build up, uh, however you want to call it, what your daily accomplishments, and you have like
Hmm.
10 to 20 little things. You're making your bed, you're putting your shopping cart away, you're not
Hmm.
procrastinating on work, certain things like that. Like that message was so ingrained in me that that is the type of man that I wanted to be. I wanted to be reliable. I didn't want to be this person anymore. So the ethos was the first thing that I needed to establish the type of man that I wanted to be. And then I looked at characteristics that I thought were important, things that I held dear, things that I struggled with, especially because I knew that the things I struggled with were the things that I needed to improve upon to in order to essentially save my life and keep me on that straight and narrow. And that's where self-discipline, humility, and gratitude came in.
Mm.
I used to be a disciplined person. And somewhere along the way, and I know where it was, but I lost that. I was
Yeah.
the guy that would wake up at 5 a.m. and I was working out twice a day. I was the guy that I was always going to do the things, the hard things, because I knew the benefit later on would always be reciprocated to me. I was never afraid of doing those challenging things, whether it be working out, schoolwork, anything like that. And I lost that for a long time. And, being an athlete, being at that level, being so brainwashed by the drugs and by, the little bit of notoriety that you get, I guess, from being a D1 football player. And this is kind of before social media blew up. Um, so people weren't talking about you all the time, but I lost my humility. I was not a humble person anymore. When I first got to Arizona, I thought that I had all the answers. I thought that I was more successful than all these other guys because I accomplished more in my
Mm.
short period of life that they couldn't tell me anything that I didn't
Mm.
already
That's
know.
interesting. So you had a
When
big
in
ego walking in there.
My
Yeah, they
ego
had to
was
strip that
massive.
away from you. Yeah.
When in reality, I had no idea how to live my life properly.
Right.
I
Right.
had no idea how to wake up every day, go to
Yeah.
work, go to the gym, come
Yeah.
home, and be satisfied with who I was as a person
Right. Right.
because I knew nothing. And they tell you that when you're out there. They're like, forget everything you thought you knew because it's wrong.
Hmm.
And if it wasn't wrong, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
And that was such a
Right.
great way to describe it because in reality, they couldn't be any more true. I
Mm.
had no idea how to live my life like a functional human being. And so that circle that we had every night, they beat me down and they stripped that away from me. And it's kind of like
Mm.
I relate it to like Navy SEAL training where it's like they break you
Yeah.
down so much and then they build you back up. They
Yeah.
destroyed me and they
Yeah.
crushed my ego where I almost went the opposite way, where it was like I wasn't good enough to even be here in a way. And then they built
Mm.
me back up into the person that I was. And I was grateful for that because I certainly needed that. And I knew that
Mm.
if I didn't get that humility back in my life, I wouldn't survive because that really keeps you in check. That really allows you
Yeah.
to ask for help when needed,
Seek help. Exactly. Yeah.
which was
Right.
huge,
Right.
which was something that I struggle with. I'm
Right.
sure you struggle with. Everybody struggles with.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then gratitude was the last characteristic that I
Mm.
wanted to instill along this journey. And it's
Mm.
because a long time ago, I just stopped being grateful for everything that I had in this life. And it only
Mm.
took um, me, I did a real deep dive one day and I was just like, everybody was like journaling and do this and list out the things that you're grateful for. And it sounds so easy, but with somebody that's never
Hmm.
really practiced it, it's very challenging because you don't, you're very surface level. And I was like, all right,
Mm.
well, unfortunately at the time, one of my good buddies just overdosed and passed away. And,
Sorry to
it
hear
was a
that.
very trying time for me. And I
Mm.
thought to myself, and I was like, well, I'm grateful that I'm alive. And
Still
that's
here,
where I
yeah.
started from. I really had nothing else because in my mind, I had no material objects. So to me, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
grateful because there was nothing to be grateful for. When in
Mm.
reality, I had everything to be grateful for. I am grateful
Mm.
for my sobriety, for my support system that I was building. And on top
Yeah.
of that, just the fact that I'm breathing today, knowing the statistics of how many people relapse, how many people die from this stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the starting point for learning how to just be grateful every day. And I still practice this to this day, where every morning I don't write it, but it's almost, and I wouldn't even call it meditation, but I acknowledge every single thing I have in my life, big and small. My son, my house, my car, my dog, my relationships, how I am as a father, as a husband, as a son now, as a brother, those things. And I go through it and I go through it. And, some days I don't want to do it. Most days, actually, I don't want to do it. But I know
Mm-hmm.
that if I skip out on doing these things, I become complacent. I
Mm-hmm.
so easily can slip back to those negative actions that once killed me. And so I force myself to do it, which brings it back to being disciplined. So they all are interchangeable. They all go into one
Mm.
another. And so once I established those habits, I really started putting that, putting the work in, putting the practice in, getting a disciplined lifestyle, asking for help wherever I could, journaling, meditating. And that is really, that is what I've done from 2015 up until now. I'll be sober for 10 years in November of this year.
Wow.
So
Congratulations, Brian. That's amazing.
thank you so much, which is kind
That's a
of crazy
huge
to think because
accomplishment.
yeah, and I'm turning 33 tomorrow. So it's like I've been sober since I was 23 years old, essentially, which is
Wow.
crazy to think about. And
Yeah, you were young.
it's such an afterthought for me. People ask me every time I speak, the kids always ask, what would it take for you to ever go back? And I honestly can't even give them a straight answer because nothing that I could think of, it's so far out of my mind that it's not even a tangible thing. Like it's not something that I would ever do under my own power. And I know
Mm.
people hate saying that where it's like, well, never say never. No, but I
Right.
I actually know. Like I will
Yeah.
never do it, because I've learned how to deal with adversity. I've learned how to deal with, heartbreak and failure and horrific things that have come up in my life by implementing these habits in my life so that when things go wrong, I hate to say it, but I'm prepared for it because I've
Yeah.
done hard things and I've done these processes for so long that it doesn't matter
And
what
and you
happens.
probably have indicators, right? So that you know, so that you can step outside of yourself, right? That ego has been stripped away. The notion that you need your support system, you need to go through this, and an awareness of what are the indicators of when I may be, inching back towards that direction. I'm
100%.
sure that you have some things that will force you to reach out for help.
Well, and that's why it's so important for you to be open and honest with yourself because
Right.
if you're not open and honest, and I continuously don't make my bed every day, and I continuously
Hmm.
wake up at 5 a.m. and go back to sleep and not go to the gym, and I continuously lie to my wife and lie to my family about little things, and I'm talking little
Mm.
things. Everything in life compounds. So when you continuously do bad things, bad
Mm.
things inevitably will come to you. So I know if I continuously do those things in the wrong fashion and I'm not living by my ethos and being the man that I want to be,
Mhm.
I know for a fact, inevitably, listen, I may not go back to drugs, but I will turn into that same person that I was. And that
Mm.
is not somebody
Mm.
that I want to be. Lying,
Mm.
manipulative, undisciplined,
Mhm.
untrustworthy, unreliable.
Mhm.
That's just not, I'll never be him again because, you know, I was saying before, I fall short all the time every morning, if my kid's in the bed, if my wife's still sleeping, and then we get up, it's a lazy Sunday, we just worked out, like, yeah, guess what? Sometimes I don't make the bed, but I acknowledge it. And I literally say to myself, you didn't make the bed today. okay, we're going to do it tomorrow. You know,
Right,
I
right,
don't think I've
right.
ever missed 2 days in a row. I've
Uh,
missed a day on a lot of stuff. Believe
mhm,
me, I'm lazy. I procrastinate. It's human being. It's human nature. We want to be comfort. We want comfort. We don't want these hard things. I have fallen short more times than you can count, but I won't fall short twice in a week. It'll be one day and then back on the horse the next day, whether that be with eating, working out, making my bed. It's a one-off thing. I allow it, I acknowledge it, I'm honest with myself,
mm,
and I know where that could lead. So that's,
amazing.
yeah.
So Brian, I know that you're a really busy guy and I'm extremely grateful for your time. We're about 10 minutes away from an hour, which I'm committed to getting you back into your world
Yeah, no,
in that
you're good. No
time.
rush.
So
I'm good.
yeah, so let me just kind of, I want to make sure I caught all of these golden nuggets that you've
Yeah.
dropped into this conversation. When we were texting back and forth, or maybe on our initial phone call, I'd mentioned to you that I lost my nephew
Yes.
to an opioid addiction, and it's still something that, we'll never really truly heal from it, and it's just still raw. And as I sit here listening to you, I'm grateful that you've made it through,
Thank you so
and you're
much.
you're a true inspiration
I really
to
appreciate that.
everybody else who's struggling,
Yeah.
and I think the best thing that you could be doing is what you are doing, right? You're talking to young kids who could potentially go down the same path,
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that. So I thank you, and I'm sure many others would echo that. But to kind of break it down to takeaways, and then I have a few questions for
Yes,
you,
absolutely.
just basic questions. So to me, what I'm taking away is that the like two key things in this was the stripping of the ego, right? And really getting down to a level of recognizing that you don't know shit, right?
Yeah,
And there's a better way and you need to learn it, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't be in this place. So you need a willingness to accept
absolutely.
that you don't know what you're doing and that you need help.
Yes.
And keeping that mindset that you are always going to need to draw on the help of others. That's wisdom, right? Entering our lives. That's how it works. Having that accountability group beside you, I think that was critical, right? Because it seemed like until you made it out there to Arizona, nothing was really working, right? But then you finally landed in the right place with the right group of people, and the moon and the stars lined up for you to be able to get through this unbelievably difficult thing to get through.
100%.
And then from that experience, one of the key habits that you have that seems to be most important is just an overall sense of gratitude, just being thankful for the little things every day that
Absolutely.
you have the power to do.
Yeah. And it's such a simple action. And I talk about this quickly in my speech where it's just by doing like a simple acknowledgement, a simple journaling of just
Mm,
taking a step back and saying, hey, and my wife laughs because she's the worrier in the relationship. And I'm not anymore because I know that we have a great life and I know that things will work out. And she's always like, the money and this and that. And I'm just like, and she hates hearing it, but I'm like, have you tried like, writing a gratitude list? And we joke about it, but I'm dead serious with her, because
yeah.
I'm like, babe, we
But
have
you're her husband, so she's not going to want to hear it
exactly.
from you.
And I'm like, we have
I can
so
relate to that.
much compared to I send her things on Instagram all the time of how many people don't have access to clean water or food every day or clothes on their back. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. It's hard when we're living in this world to kind of
Right.
look outside of it to
Yeah.
see what other people are going through. But listen,
Hmm.
everything in life is relative. And I live by that,
Hmm.
where it's, what's my story? Probably was nothing compared to what other people have gone through in addiction, probably wasn't anything compared to what other people have gone through in other countries dealing with war and death. So I really try to put that into perspective and I try to live my life like that, where it's like, yeah, I get it. We have stressors, we have worries, we have things going on, but at the end of the day, we're alive, we're happy, we have an unbelievable son, we have a home, a roof over our heads. We never worry about when our next meal is coming from. Like just having those tangible things in your life is huge for me because there was time where I didn't have that. And there's I know
Yeah.
a lot of people that across the world do not have access to that and may never have access to it until the day they die. And so I really just try to put things into perspective and try to just think outside of this, first world type of mindset that we're in, where it's like
Hmm.
you need to just be grateful for everything, the little things you have in your life, and know that you are fortunate to live where you live and to be in the position you are and to have the job you have. So, that gratitude, it really is everything because in the speech, I say gratitude. What do I say? I talk about when I'm highlighting gratitude, gratitude enhances all the other habits I went over, your
Mm.
ethos, your self-discipline, humility, accountability. It enhances everything because without
Hmm.
gratitude, it, they go hand in hand. But really, gratitude is the way that you are going to become happy in your life and and
Hmm.
and and experience joy again and be able to appreciate everything that you have. There is no other way. Discipline's not going to get you there. Humility's not. It's only going to be gratitude.
Interesting. Great words, and I agree with all of them. All right, so Brian, some questions for you. How can
Yes, sir.
listeners connect with you?
So I have a website, obviously,
Uh-huh.
with all my, I call it my speaker hub. It has
Hmm.
all places that I've been, videos, testimonials. We have a contact page that a lot of people do go through. They fill it out. We have a email, which is connect@murphselite.com. Uh,
Okay.
I get a lot of people from LinkedIn, from Instagram that kind of message me, administrators, people that want to put on community events, things like that. So there are a multitude of ways. Email, my website, through direct messaging on social media,
Mm.
all of that. So that's
Okay,
really what has
awesome.
been successful for us.
So, what else can somebody listening to this do to help you and your mission and to help you succeed in what you're doing?
Our hardest part of this is, and we've been fortunate to speak so many places and to be in a lot of schools, and I'm extremely grateful for that. But the hardest part of this job is really just the first connection. So
Mm.
I found out that word of mouth obviously is
Hmm.
it is huge because anytime I can get a meeting with somebody, I don't think ever person to person, Zoom to Zoom, I've never not booked anything. It's just the
Hmm.
initial of getting in touch with people. The what these administrators are going through every day, dealing, superintendents, board of ed, they're busy, and we
Yeah,
have email
sure.
marketing campaigns and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
it slips through the cracks. It really does. So our biggest job is really just to get that first meeting in front of people. That's it.
Okay.
So I think
And
word of mouth,
specifically to school administrators?
100%. School
Okay,
administrators,
that's your target.
municipal
Okay.
alliances, superintendents,
Yeah,
principals, that's it. That's who I talk to.
got it.
That's who I'm reaching out to. That's who we're email blasting. And yeah, the word of mouth is it's huge. It has been a savior for us on booking more schools, getting into more events, community centers, stuff like that. So the word of mouth has really been awesome for us lately.
Great. All right. So anybody listening, let's help Brian. If you know school administrators, principals, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
I can tell you
absolutely.
that my son, Marco, again, we started out talking about this. It really was a moving experience for him to the point where he said, "Hey, Dad, you gotta reach out to Brian. He'd be a great,
Yeah.
person for you to talk to about Team Up for Hope." So that's how the connection was made. You were
Well, I'm
impactful for
grateful
him.
for him because I love
Yeah.
connecting with you. So that was awesome.
So Brian, what's a good book you would recommend to somebody?
Oh, here we go. So I have a I'm a big I'm not as big of like a self-help book as I am nonfiction books. I read a lot
Hmm.
of military books. I read a
Mm.
lot of, Navy SEAL stories, stuff like that. Obviously, I've read, Atomic Habits, which has been incredible for me. Extreme
Mm.
Ownership by Jocko Willink, which is amazing. Ownership, accountability in your life. Um, but the best book
What's the
I've
name of
ever,
Jocko's book? I know Jocko, but what was the name of his book?
Extreme Ownership.
Extreme Ownership. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my favorite book ever, it's called Fearless, and it's about
Mm.
a Navy SEAL who unfortunately was KIA. But the story is incredible, and I swear it really changed my life and kind of
Mm,
gave me like the motivation to want to actually change. I read it while I was in Arizona, and the guy struggled with addiction for years and
mm,
ended up getting through a family friend, got into the Navy somehow, was still really messed up, and but he was always like an overachiever. Got into the Navy, started doing really well, turning his life around, ended up going into the SEALs. Then after 4 years, he went on to SEAL Team 6, which is just, you can't get any higher in military on planet Earth than Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. They are the most
mm,
elite fighting units on the planet that ever will be. And then he ended up going through horrific adversity with training accidents. His eye got shot out, his hand got crushed, and then he relearned how to shoot the opposite way and still passed it through
mm,
like the master course of sniper training, which is just, it's not possible what he was able to accomplish. And then, he sacrificed himself and basically uh, did this unbelievable heroic act, saving all of his teammates' lives. And, the book was just, I read it pretty much every year. And
wow.
as a reminder, I
Mm,
give it to everybody that you should see the copy. It's like rolled up into a ball because it's been read so many times by so
hmm.
many people. And yeah,
That's
that
cool.
book alone, I could not recommend that book more for anybody. I don't care if you don't even like the military, anything. The story is incredible of
Yeah.
just
Mm,
overcoming adversity, of
mm.
just being able to do hard things. It's truly the most inspirational thing I've ever read.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. How about a
Absolutely.
documentary series? Do you have any that you'd recommend?
So documentaries, not not documentaries per se, but there are a couple of shows that came out recently that are regarding, I'm sure you've seen them, like Painkiller came out, I think on Netflix. Uh,
Netflix.
it
Hmm.
was it was based off a true story and then there
Yep.
was another one with Michael Keaton that came out a few years ago, also about the how the epidemic started in West Virginia with the doctor and those two shows that were highlighting addiction. I've talked about it with some of my friends that are still sober to this day that I was in Arizona with.
Hmm.
And like we got chills because of how well they described addiction and how well they described going through
Mm.
opiate withdrawal and how well they portrayed people acting like addicts and manipulating and lying. And we would call each other and I'm like, I've never seen any show, any documentary, any 60 Minutes that has closely even resembled what this show is doing. And I'm trying to think of the other name of the show, and I can email it to you afterwards. But the one that I watched recently was Painkiller, which was amazing. And then there was definitely another one about the Sackler family with big pharma and
Hmm.
creating OxyContin and basically shipping it into West Virginia and kind of forcing it into everybody. And that's kind of where the epidemic, sorry, of opiates
Began. Yeah.
really began. So the show is incredible.
Okay. Very good. One last question. Do you have a favorite charitable cause? We like to make a donation to all of our interviewees,
Yeah.
favorite cause or
Yeah. So
charitable con.
my wife and I are part of NBTS, National Brain Tumors Society.
Okay.
One of my really close friends who works for me, he ended up getting a brain tumor last year. He's in remission now, thank God, but it was a really scary thing. Stage 3 came out of
Mm,
nowhere. He had a seizure at work. We found him. We called 911. So um, he went through chemo, radiation, really a tough
mm.
battle, but he's back at work now. He's doing great. My
Wow.
wife and I actually ran the Disney Half Marathon with MBTS, raised money for them as well. I actually have a call with them tomorrow. I'm hoping they pick me to raise money for MBTS for the New York City Marathon for this year in
Wow.
November.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so that is the charity that listen, there's so many good ones. It's really a tough thing for me because I try to just do things that hit close to home for me. And so
Hmm.
that was something that was so glaring and obvious, and he's so close and near and dear to us. It felt like the right thing to do for us. So, and BTS is where it's
Outstanding.
at.
Outstanding. All right. So we're right about an hour. I
Yeah,
navigated it closely. Great job, Brian. This was
thank you.
excellent. I'm very grateful for your time, and
Same here.
we'll talk in the near future. Thanks so much, Brian.
Definitely, Jeff. Have a great
All
day. I
right, buddy.
appreciate it.
Take care.
Take
Bye bye.
care. Bye.